It started like any other night. Me alone in this dim little booth, mic hot, coffee lukewarm, a sea of static behind my voice. Midnight shift, local station, mostly truckers and night owls tuning in. My voice has always been a comfort to people who can't sleep or won't. Sometimes I imagine them, one hand on the wheel, headlights cutting through fog, or maybe curled up in bed, face lit only by a dial glowing red. I talk, they listen. Simple. But tonight wasn't simple. I remember how it felt the moment things shifted, even if I didn't know what was happening yet. I was reading the usual community bulletin, lost dog, garage sale, some local guy's country band playing at the Moose Lodge, when the phone line lit up. Not unusual, I get calls all the time. People wanting a song, people needing to hear a friendly voice, sometimes even a confession at 2 a.m. That's the thing about radio. We're strangers, but in the dark, I'm the only one listening. That makes people braver than they'd be in daylight. The caller didn't give a name. Her voice was tight, trembling like she was holding herself together with sheer will. She said, "I know this is going to sound crazy, but my husband doesn't remember me." I thought she meant amnesia, maybe a stroke. I asked gently if he'd been to a hospital. She said, "No, he remembers everything. His job, his favorite band, even my name. But when I asked if he loved me, he looked confused. He said, 'I don't think I ever did.' I tried to say something comforting, but my throat went dry." She hung up before I could. I figured maybe it was a prank or grief. Maybe her husband really was having some kind of breakdown. I moved on. I had to. But then another call came in. Different voice. This time a man. "My kid doesn't want to hug me anymore," he said. Not like teenage stubborn. It's like I'm nothing to her. She looked me in the eye and asked why she should care. Something in his voice made the hair on my neck stand up. He said, "She knows who I am. She just doesn't feel it anymore." I wanted to believe it was coincidence. Weird timing. Emotional burnout. But I've been doing this a long time. You start to recognize when something's wrong, not just with people, but with the world itself. And this felt like a crack forming right beneath us. Still, I did what radio hosts are trained to do. I kept talking. I read the weather, took a song request, played an old Etta James track because I needed something warm, something with soul. But I was shaken. And then came the third call. A young woman this time. She didn't sound scared, just numb. "He said we're strangers now," she told me. "We've been together for years, lived together, had a whole life. But this morning, he packed a bag and said, 'I don't know why I ever thought I needed you.' And he left, just like that." I remember staring at the mic, not even realizing the song had ended. Dead air filled the studio until I snapped back and hit another track just to breathe. I tried to laugh it off on air. "Weird night, huh? Must be something in the water," I said, but my heart wasn't in it. That's when I noticed my hands were shaking. 3 calls, all about love being forgotten, but not in the usual way. This wasn't drifting apart or falling out of affection. This was clean, surgical erasure, like someone reached into these people's minds and plucked the emotion out by the root, leaving everything else intact. And the strangest part? None of the callers seemed hysterical. They were shaken, yes, but not panicked. It was as if the people around them forgetting love had already begun to feel normal, like they were adjusting to it faster than they should. Something about that scared me more than anything. By 3 a.m., I stopped taking calls. I just played music, letting the lyrics do the talking. Old tracks with heart and soul, back when love was something we sang about like it mattered. I stared at the empty studio around me, phone lines still blinking, wondering if we were watching the first quiet hours of something bigger. Something that wouldn't come with explosions or news anchors or mass hysteria, but with a soft silence. A silence that steals love one memory at a time. I didn't know it yet, but we were already too late. The next night, I walked into the studio with a tighter chest than usual. The air felt heavier. The silence before going live had this strange weight to it, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I was reading too much into those calls. But when I flicked on the mic and said my usual, "You're listening to Midnight Hour," I swear even my own voice sounded different. Quieter, hollowed out. I told myself not to bring it up again. Listeners tune in for music for comfort, not to get tangled in the host paranoia. But within 20 minutes, the first call came in. And then I knew it wasn't over. "I think it's happening to me," the caller whispered. His name was Cole, mid-30s, voice scratchy like he'd smoked since high school. "My girlfriend asked me what I wanted to do for our anniversary. And I said, 'What anniversary?' Not like I forgot the date. I forgot why it mattered. Like the emotion just slid off the memory. I know we met at that seafood place. I remember the stupid paper lobster bib I was wearing. But I don't remember how I felt. It's like I'm watching my own life from the outside." I didn't know what to say. I let him talk. He said she cried, begged him to try, said, "You have to remember what you said when I got that job in Denver. You said we were meant to be." And all he could say was, "That doesn't feel like me anymore." He wasn't crying. That's what stuck with me. He sounded disturbed, confused, but not sad. Like the ability to feel sad had been sanded down. More calls came in, trickling steadily over the next hour. Same patterns. A mother whose teenage son suddenly didn't want her at a school play, even though he used to beg her to sit front row. A woman who described her husband looking at her with what she called clinical interest, like he was trying to figure her out from a safe distance. One guy, he was a paramedic, told me about a woman who came into the ER after crashing her car. She had a wedding ring on, but when her husband arrived, she asked who he was. Then, according to the paramedic, she got annoyed when he tried to touch her. Said, "Don't do that. I don't know you." But she knew her PIN number, her birth date, her job title. She could even list every medication she was on. She just didn't know love. Not in the way that mattered. By then, I had a notepad out on my desk, scrawling notes between song breaks. I wrote words like disassociation, emotional detachment, selective memory, flat effect. I didn't know what I was doing, not really, but I needed to make sense of it. I needed it to be something I could name, something I could explain on air with calm clarity. Because if I didn't, I was afraid I'd start to believe something worse. There was one call I almost didn't take. The light blinked, but something in me hesitated, like a gut-level warning. I picked it up anyway. It was a kid. Sounded young, maybe 10 or 11. His voice was thin, the way kids sound when they've been crying but are trying not to. He said, "I think my mom forgot how to hug." That was all. Just that. He didn't explain further, and I didn't push him. He hung up. I sat in the booth, music rolling in the background, thinking about what it means to forget how to hug. Not forget what a hug is, but the instinct behind it. The thing that makes you reach out without thinking. That's when it hit me. This wasn't memory loss. This wasn't brain damage or some virus rotting neurons. People remembered names, events, addresses, but the emotional weight gone. It was like love had been surgically removed, like someone figured out how to leave the structure of a life intact but hollow out its meaning. And here's what chilled me to the bone. No one mentioned panic. No one said people were rioting or looting or hurting each other. No one was screaming in the streets. They were just moving on, casually, indifferently, like love was a season that passed, and they had already packed up the decorations. I think that scared me more than anything else. Not the forgetting, but how quickly people adapted to it. At the top of the hour, I read a quote on air from an old novel. It said, "The opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference." I let that hang in the air, then queued up a Sam Cooke track, the kind of song that used to make people slow dance in kitchens. As it played, I found myself watching the door to the booth. Part of me was waiting for someone to walk in, maybe my wife, maybe a friend, maybe nobody, and look at me the same way those callers described. Like I was someone they used to know, and no longer cared to. You're listening to the radio as a disease erases people's memories of love. By the third night, I stopped pretending this was a fluke. Whatever was happening, it had dug its fingers deep into the world. It wasn't isolated. It wasn't contained. The phone lines never stopped blinking. Some of the voices sounded familiar now, like regulars calling back, giving updates. Others were first-timers, people who never thought they'd pick up the phone and talk to a stranger at 2:17 a.m., but were so disturbed they had nowhere else to go. Then the signal came. I was just coming out a Marvin Gaye track, mid-sentence, saying something like, "Love songs feel different these days, don't they?" And the station cut to static. Not dead air, not malfunction, just a long, ugly burst of static, followed by a mechanical voice reading from what sounded like a government bulletin. No build-up, no explanation. It called the phenomenon affective dissociation syndrome. That was the first time I'd heard the term. The voice was calm, too calm, textbook PR tone, the kind of voice designed to make people feel safe even as the world falls apart behind the curtain. It said the condition had been documented in multiple regions, that it involved rapid deterioration of affective memory, and that cognitive function remains intact, but emotional attachment is increasingly absent or untraceable in individuals at various stages. It ended by saying, "There is no known cure or containment strategy at this time. Citizens are advised to remain calm and continue normal routines." Normal routines, as if that meant anything anymore. I sat there staring at the monitor, one hand on the fader, my chest going tight. Not because the message aired, but because I didn't authorize it. It bypassed our station's software completely. Someone high up wanted this out, and they wanted it in everyone's ears. No commentary, no discussion, just a sterile warning dropped into the middle of a love song. I said nothing for a minute, maybe two. Then I turned the mic back on and said, "Well, guess it's official now." I tried to play another song, but my hand was shaking too much to drop the needle cleanly. The stylus scraped. It sounded wrong. I let the silence stretch longer than I should have. It wasn't dead air. It was mourning. Eventually I spoke again. I told the listeners what the bulletin didn't, that it's not just a clinical condition. It's not just affective memory loss. It's people forgetting the bonds that shape them. Fathers who don't feel proud. Couples who don't miss each other. Friends who leave without saying goodbye. Not because they're angry, but because they've lost the reason not to. The scariest thing about this disease is that it doesn't destroy who you are, it just strips away why you matter to each other. The calls came faster after that. One woman described how her teenage daughter had stopped calling her mom. Not in rebellion, just stopped. She now used her first name, said it felt more natural. When asked why, the girl simply replied, "You don't feel like a mom anymore." A man from Chicago told me his elderly father, suffering from early signs of it, had torn up family photo albums. Didn't even get mad, he said. Just said, "I don't need these. I don't recognize what I'm supposed to feel when I look at them." And then came a call that stuck with me all night. It was from a nurse in the city, an ICU shift worker, long hours, calm under pressure. She said a woman in room 12 had been asking for her fiancé, begging to see him, crying, panicking, said she needed to hear his voice to feel safe. When the fiancé finally arrived, she looked at him like he was a stranger, told him to leave, said she felt nothing. The nurse said what broke her was that the man didn't even fight back. He just nodded, said, "I understand," and walked out. That was it. No anger, no demand for answers, just quiet surrender. And the nurse, this tough, sleep-deprived woman who had probably seen everything, ended the call by saying, "I've never seen something so gentle feel so apocalyptic." I couldn't stop thinking about that phrase. Gentle apocalypse. That's what this was. No blood in the streets. No collapsing governments. Just a soft unraveling. Like someone pulling at a thread in the dark, until the whole fabric of our lives comes undone without us even noticing. I glanced over at the photo I keep on my desk. Sarah and me on our wedding day. She's laughing. I'm trying not to cry. I remember how she smelled that day, like lavender and nerves. I touched the edge of the frame with one finger, like I was trying to remind myself it was real. I hadn't heard from her in almost 24 hours. Not a text, not a voicemail, nothing. I leaned into the mic and said, if anyone out there has someone they love, someone who still knows what that means, hold on tight. And if they've already started to forget, remind them. Every day, even if they don't feel it yet. I cued the next track. Something raw. Something with ache in it, and I wondered how long it would be before I'd stop feeling it too. That night, I didn't wait for the calls. I asked for them. I opened the lines wide and said, if someone you love has changed, if they've gone cold without warning, if you feel like you're the only one still holding on, call me. I didn't know what I was hoping for. Maybe proof that this thing wasn't spreading as fast as it seemed. Maybe just to know I wasn't going crazy. But the phone didn't ring, it screamed. The first caller didn't waste time. "I don't know where she went," he said. His name was Jeff. She's still here, physically, but it's like someone took her out of her. He talked about his wife, high school sweethearts, 23 years married, 2 kids in college. Said she started asking weird questions last week. Things like, do you think we were happy? And would you still love me if I wasn't me? He told her yes, of course. But she just smiled and nodded, like she was humoring him. Then yesterday, she handed him her wedding ring and said, I think it's time we stop pretending. Jeff paused. I thought the line had gone dead. Then I heard him swallow hard. She used to dance while she cooked. Elvis on the speaker, spatula in hand. I'd walk in the room, and she'd pull me in no matter how tired I was. And now she doesn't even look at me. I asked if she was getting treatment, if any of the clinics had answers. He just said, they gave me pamphlets, told me to be patient. How do you be patient when someone forgets what it means to love you? Before I could respond, he hung up. The second caller was quieter. A younger woman, maybe mid-20s. She said her older sister had moved out suddenly, just packed a bag and left. She didn't take anything personal, the caller said. Not a photo, not her favorite mug, just a backpack and her phone. When she asked why, the sister replied, I think I liked you once, but I don't know if that was real or just habit. That line hit me harder than I expected. Because isn't that what this thing does? It scrubs out the meaning, leaves behind muscle memory. People still doing the motions, maybe even saying the right things, but the emotion's gone. And once the feeling is gone, everything else becomes optional. One guy called in from a truck stop in New Mexico. Said he hadn't been home in 3 days. His wife told him she needed space, and he just kept driving. There's no point in going back, he said. She looked me in the eye and said, you're a good man, but I don't think I ever loved you. I think I just needed someone at the time. I asked what he planned to do next. Keep driving, I guess, he said. It's easier to be nowhere than be somewhere you're not wanted. And that's when I realized something no one had said outright yet. This wasn't just about loss. It was about replacement. Like people were rewriting their own narratives, cutting the parts that didn't fit their new emotional logic. The history stayed, but the love was edited out like a bad scene in a movie. Around 2:40 a.m., I took a call from someone I've never been able to forget. Her name was Eliza. She had one of those clear, even tone voices that doesn't need to raise volume to feel powerful. She was a nurse, still in her scrubs, sitting in her car outside the hospital. Her shift had just ended. She told me she'd watched 3 different families today deal with it. One man sobbing while his partner calmly told him she didn't feel anything anymore. A woman whose son asked to be picked up from school by a neighbor instead of her said her hugs felt off. And a couple in their 70s who, according to Eliza, sat silently for half an hour before the wife said, I think I'd rather be alone now. Eliza said she stayed calm through all of it. But what broke her, what finally made her cry, was when she called her mother during her break, just needing to hear a familiar voice, and her mother sounded like she didn't want to talk. No warmth, no love, just small talk, like 2 strangers at a bus stop. She ended the call early, said she was tired. I wanted to scream, Eliza told me, but I didn't, because screaming only makes sense when someone cares enough to hear it. I let the silence breathe before responding. Then I said what I hadn't dared to admit out loud before. I think this thing is growing faster than anyone's reporting. I think it's not just a sickness, it's a reset. And the worst part is, we're starting to accept it. I could hear the text notifications stacking up behind me. Listeners sending messages, stories, cries for help. I didn't read them on air. I couldn't. Not all of them. Not yet. Instead, I queued up a song I hadn't played in years. Old soul. Something warm. Something that used to remind people of Sunday mornings and worn kitchen floors. As the music played, I leaned back in my chair, watching the reflection of myself in the studio glass. And for a moment, I wondered, if this thing reached me, would I even notice it? Or would I just wake up one day and stop feeling everything that ever mattered? By the time I came back on air the following night, the airwaves felt different, heavier somehow, like the silence before a storm, not loud, but deeply present. I think that's when I stopped seeing this as an anomaly or even a tragedy. It was a pattern now, a new shape forming in the dark, and I had to understand it before it swallowed all of us. I opened with a simple question. When did you first notice they were changing? I didn't say who they were. I didn't need to. Everyone listening already knew. The responses came in fast. A teacher in Wisconsin said her students were still raising their hands, still doing homework, still laughing at jokes. But when one of them scraped his knee, the other kids didn't react. No concern, no comfort, just a blank curiosity. She said it was like they were all playing at being people. Another caller from Texas told me he caught his boyfriend watching old home videos on mute. I asked him why. The caller said, and he said he just wanted to see what happiness looked like it was something he could study. That was the turning point for me. I stopped thinking this was about forgetting names or faces. This thing wasn't attacking memory. It was extracting meaning. People still knew things. They just didn't care. And if you can remember the facts of a relationship, but none of the emotions, isn't that just a story with all the love sucked out? It wasn't just that people were losing connection. They were losing the reason to care. They lost it. That night, I started logging the stages. I didn't have science, just caller testimonies, gut instinct, and too many sleepless hours. Here's what I noticed. Stage 1, emotional dulling. People start to feel off. They don't laugh as easily. They forget inside jokes. They stop reaching out for affection, not because of anger or resentment, just absence. Stage 2, cognitive dissonance. That's when the affected start questioning the authenticity of their feelings. Did I ever love him? Was I just going through the motions? They begin to rewrite their own narratives, downplay the significance of old memories, revise emotional history. Stage 3, disengagement. They leave. Or if they stay, they go quiet, detached, functional but hollow, like emotional ghosts moving through the spaces love used to live. A woman emailed me a photo that haunts me still. Her and her partner standing in their kitchen, side by side. She's smiling, laughing even. He's standing perfectly still, staring straight ahead, as if he's watching a commercial he's already seen 100 times. She wrote, "This was the night he told me he didn't think we were a thing anymore. Like love was a phase we both got over." One listener told me his dog still recognized him with joy, still wagged its tail, jumped up, licked his face. But his partner of 7 years looked at him like an old coworker, said, "I think I've outgrown whatever we had." That stuck with me too, because dogs don't forget love, not even in old age, not even after neglect. But humans? Apparently, we do. That night, something else clicked into place. Every story, every call, every desperate plea, they all had one thing in common. The people forgetting weren't sad about it. They weren't in pain or grief or guilt. They were calm, serene even, like something in them had been numbed, but they'd come to accept that numbness as normal. It wasn't that they were broken. It was that they'd adapted to the absence. And that made me wonder, was this thing biological, viral, or was it something deeper, stranger? What if the disease wasn't just a virus moving through cells, but a shift in human wiring? What if we were evolving into creatures who remembered people by name, function, history, but without affection? What if love had become obsolete? I didn't say that out loud. Not yet. I wasn't ready. But I did ask another question on air. If this condition is spreading by proximity or by thought, if simply witnessing it makes it easier for your brain to follow, how long until we all forget what love felt like? A few seconds of silence followed. Then, like clockwork, the line blinked again. It was a man named Toby. Soft voice, somewhere between tired and numb. He said, "My mom still cooks for me, still folds my laundry, but she hasn't said I love you in weeks." So tonight I asked her if she still did. And she just said, "Why does that matter? Why does that matter?" 3 words that gutted me. Not because she was cruel, but because she was honest. She didn't know anymore. And maybe that's the worst part of all this. Not the forgetting, not the silence, not the separation. It's that the people we love aren't fighting it. They're just letting go. As the show wound down, I played an old ballad, one of those songs so full of feeling it almost hurts to listen. I let the record spin, crackling and warm. I didn't speak over it. I just sat back and wondered, if I stopped feeling love tomorrow, would I even notice? Or would I just shrug and carry on like everyone else? It's strange what you start noticing when you're afraid something inside you might be slipping away. The little rituals, the familiar noises, the warmth behind certain phrases. That night, I realized I hadn't heard my wife Sarah, say my name in days. Not Han or babe. Those surface-level endearments could hide a lot. I mean my actual name, spoken with intention. The way people do when they're really looking at you. It used to come from her in the softest way, like she was drawing it out with breath. A habit, a melody. Lately, it was just silence. Polite silence, if such a thing exists. I've been talking around it for a while, especially on air, mentioning someone close to me or people I know when I really meant her. But it's different when the cracks start forming in your own house. You can explain away strangers. You can rationalize callers. But when it's your own wife leaving the dishes spotless and the bed made and the lights dimmed, but without a kiss, a glance, a laugh, it hits like a slow-moving freight train. That night, I stopped pretending. On air, I said her name. Sarah's been distant, I told my listeners. And I don't mean moody or quiet. I mean gone, but still here. Like someone's playing her from a memory. I said it plainly, with no drama. Just the facts. I figured if I couldn't talk about it on my own show, what was the point of doing this at all? I told them about how she used to call the station when I worked nights, just to leave dumb voicemails. Sometimes jokes. Sometimes nothing at all. Just a song playing in the background she knew I liked. One time, she whispered, "You're my favorite sound," and hung up. I played that recording on the air. It still sat in a dusty folder on my desktop. Sarah, February. Just a 12-second clip of her voice, unpolished and intimate. I hit play and let it run. The studio went quiet except for her voice. Even I stopped breathing for a second. "You're my favorite sound," she said, soft and smiling. Then static. It gutted me. Not because I missed her, but because she was still technically here. Sitting 3 rooms away every night, scrolling through her phone, eating in silence, responding with polite nods instead of warmth. There were no arguments. No slam doors. Just nothing. And that's what made it worse. After the clip ended, I let the silence hang. Then the calls poured in. One man said his partner had started setting a separate alarm, 10 minutes earlier than his, just so she could leave for work without talking. "It's like she's trying to erase our overlap," he said. I asked her why she doesn't say goodbye anymore. She said, "Because I don't know what you want from me." A woman called to say her father, who had once cried during her wedding toast, now looked at her wedding photos and said, "It looks like you were happy." Not we, you. Like he was narrating someone else's life. That's when I started to think maybe this wasn't just a disease. Maybe it was a mirror, showing us what happens when emotional presence gets replaced with function. When the actions remain, but the meaning fades. I told my listeners, if you're still being hugged, if someone still waits for you at the door or kisses your cheek without thinking, don't ignore it. Don't waste it, because one day it might stop and they won't even know they lost it. I paused, not for effect, but because I needed to swallow something that felt like grief. Then I said, last night, Sarah sat next to me on the couch. We watched a whole movie. Same blanket, same snacks, same room, but it felt like I was alone. When it ended, she just got up and said, "Thanks for picking that." It wasn't bad. Then went to bed. I didn't follow her. Not because I was mad, because I didn't know if there was anything left to follow. It's like trying to hold on to someone made of smoke. I ended the hour with a song we used to dance to in the kitchen. I used to tease her for pretending to know the lyrics. She'd just hum through the parts she didn't know and laugh into my shoulder. I don't think she remembers that anymore. And I don't know how much longer I'll remember it either. Around 1 a.m., a caller from a town I'd never heard a patch through, somewhere out in Nebraska, he said. Small place. Real small. Used to be maybe 100 people here, he told me. I think we're down to a couple dozen now, and nobody really talks about it. His voice was steady. Not panicked, not even sad. Just distant. Detached in a way that felt too familiar. I stay because I own the gas station. Only one in a 30-mile radius, he said. No one's told me to keep it running. No orders, no schedule. I just do it. Habit, I guess. He paused, then added, feels like that's what everything's become now, just habit. I asked if people were still leaving, if they packed up with some plan in mind. He chuckled. Nah, they just drift. It's not panic. Nobody's running. It's more like they remember their family, or their job, or their pets. And then one day, they look around and go, why am I still here? And then they're gone. He told me his best friend of 30 years stopped showing up for poker night 2 weeks ago. No explanation. The man just didn't see the point anymore. Said he remembered we used to have fun, but he couldn't remember what made it fun. He looked me in the eye and said, "I'm not mad or anything. I just don't need this anymore." Like it was a phase. And the most chilling part? This caller, he hadn't tried to stop him, said it didn't even occur to him at the time. I watched him leave and waved. He said, "I didn't feel anything. Not until now, telling you. And even now, it's more like remembering I should have felt something. Like muscle memory without the muscle." I sat there, listening to this man describe the hollowing of an entire town, and I realized this wasn't just about people forgetting how to love. It was about forgetting how to belong. The disease, if that's even what we can still call it, is turning whole communities into echo chambers. Empty buildings, quiet streets, people walking through routines like background characters in a dream they forgot was theirs. Another caller chimed in right after. A woman who worked in a daycare said the babies had stopped reaching out for cuddles. They eat, they sleep, they play, she told me. But they don't cry for comfort anymore. Even when they fall, they just stare, like they're waiting for something they've never felt and don't know how to ask for. That one cut deep, because if babies are affected, if we're coming into this world already numbed, then what kind of future are we building? A world without connection, without longing, without love? I told her, maybe it's instinct, maybe it's learned, maybe something is rewiring us before we even know what it means to need each other. She didn't answer, just said, "I still rock them though, even if they don't lean into me anymore." And I told her to keep doing it, because someone has to. In the final stretch of the show, I played a track from the 60s, something soft and slow, like a lullaby for a world starting to forget lullabies. Then I leaned into the mic and said something I hadn't planned. "I think this thing isn't trying to destroy us," I said. "I think it's trying to quiet us, like it's pressing mute on the part of our souls that reaches out. And if enough of us go quiet, if enough of us forget how to miss each other, then maybe that's it. Maybe love just becomes a myth, a story we used to believe." The line blinked again. "Same guy from Nebraska. I've been listening," he said, "and I think you're right. It's not that we're dying. It's that we're going quiet." I asked him if he was scared. "No," he said, "but I think that's the problem." The next night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out the crate of old vinyls under my desk, the real dusty ones, the records with faded sleeves and titles handwritten in marker. Songs from before streaming, before algorithms told us what we liked. Back when people made mixtapes and burned CDs for each other just to say, "I thought of you today." I started the show by spinning one of those records. No intro, no station ID, just a warm, static-kissed ballad pouring out over the airwaves. Something with too much brass and not enough polish. Something that felt like someone was playing it for a person they loved. And for the first time in a while, I didn't get a call right away. But I did get messages, a flood of them. One said, "I forgot this song existed. I remember dancing to it at my wedding. My wife used to hum it in the kitchen. She hasn't sung anything in a long time." Another wrote, "I didn't know I could still cry, but this song brought something back. Not all of it, but enough." And one simply said, "Thank you. This made the emptiness feel less final." That's when something new took root in my chest. Not hope exactly. Something more cautious. Maybe curiosity. A whisper of a question. Can music carry what memory has lost? I started taking calls again. A woman named Denise said her teenage son hadn't hugged her in months. Not since his symptoms started. But when she played an old lullaby she used to sing him when he was small, he stood in the doorway and listened. Said nothing. Didn't cry. But he stayed. And that alone felt like a miracle. A retired music teacher told me she started playing piano again. Not for an audience, just for herself. She said her hands remembered what her heart had started to forget. And as she played, her husband, who'd barely spoken in days, came and sat beside her. Didn't speak. Didn't touch her. Just listened. She said it was the first time she didn't feel alone all week. So that became the theme of the night. Memory through music. I invited listeners to call in and tell me the one song that still made them feel. Not think, not remember dates or names, but feel. And suddenly, the station turned into something different. Not just a broadcast, not just a voice in the dark. It became a lighthouse. One caller played a voicemail recording of her late father singing, "You Are My Sunshine, off-key during a road trip. Said her daughter, who had started forgetting who Grandpa was, listened to it and started humming along. No questions, no context, just music. Another caller played the first few bars of a wedding march. Her wife couldn't remember their anniversary anymore, but the music made her pause mid-conversation. She tilted her head like she was hearing something from underwater, the caller said. She didn't speak, but she smiled. Just for a second. I hadn't seen that smile in weeks. That was the moment I realized, maybe music isn't just background noise to love. Maybe it's where love hides when the rest of it starts slipping away. I told the listeners, if they forget your name, play them your song. If they forget your story, remind them with a melody. If they stop saying, I love you, maybe the right lyric can save for them. Because something in us remembers harmony long after we forget the words. I closed the hour with a live recording of a jazz piece from the 50s. No vocals, just saxophone and piano and something aching underneath. It didn't need lyrics. The feeling was enough. As it played, I looked around the studio and realized how quiet it had become. Not lonely, just listening, like even the walls wanted to remember. And maybe for the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't broadcasting into a void. I was reaching something, or someone. Around 2:15 a.m., I opened an envelope that had been sitting on the station desk since the start of my shift. It wasn't marked urgent, just handwritten in blue ink, the kind you see on the back of birthday cards. No return address, just my name, and inside, folded 3 times, was a letter. Nothing digital, no email, no voicemail, no social handle. Just paper and pen, like something out of another era. I read it once to myself, then I read it again. Then I turned on the mic and asked, would you mind if I shared something someone wrote to me tonight? I didn't wait for a response. I knew the people who were still listening, who hadn't given up yet. They'd want to hear it too. The letter was from a woman named Ava. She didn't say where she was from, only that she was writing from her kitchen table, alone, while her husband slept in the other room. Or rather, the man who used to be her husband. She wrote that he was still kind, still polite. He still made her coffee in the morning, still locked the doors at night. But he'd stopped reaching for her in his sleep, stopped resting his hand on her back when they passed each other in the hall, stopped laughing at the jokes only they used to understand. She wrote, it's not like he's gone. He's right here. And somehow, that's what makes it worse. If he'd left, I could hate him. If he died, I could mourn. But this is like loving a ghost who keeps refilling your coffee and asking how your day was. She said she tried everything, photos, old home movies, their wedding song. He'd nod, say that's nice, maybe even smile. But it was like watching someone admire someone else's memories. The connection was gone, and he didn't even realize what was missing. And yet, she hadn't given up. That was the part that undid me. She wrote the letter because she wanted to leave something behind. Not for him, for herself. Something physical, something real. She said, I need my love to exist somewhere outside my own chest. I need it to be real, even if no one remembers it. So I'm giving it to your station. Make it echo, just once. I read the closing lines of the letter out loud. If you ever hear this, I hope you know I didn't stop loving you. You just stopped feeling it. And that's not your fault. But it's not my fault either. The line was silent for almost a full minute after I finished. Then a caller named Marla broke the stillness. She whispered, that letter? That's my life. She said her partner had been distant for months. They still slept in the same bed, shared meals, paid bills, but there was no intimacy, no spark, no warmth, just routine. She said she'd begun to feel like a roommate in her own marriage. And when she tried to bring it up, he responded, you're making a big deal out of nothing. Nothing. That word echoed in my head longer than it should have. Marla didn't cry. Her voice was calm, composed. But near the end, she said, I've been feeling crazy. But hearing that letter, now I know I'm not. And she's not. None of them are. That's what this show has turned into. Not just a broadcast. It's become the archive of everything this world is trying to forget. Love letters, farewells, whispers that would have been lost in a digital sea, now captured in real time, over the air. Later, another caller said he was going to write a letter too. Not to send, not to share, just to see his love on paper. to know it was once real, that it existed before it faded. I ended the segment with a track from an old singer-songwriter whose voice cracked halfway through the final chorus. Raw, unfiltered, imperfect in the way real love always is. As it played, I folded Ava's letter back up, gently, and tucked it into the drawer where I keep things I don't want to forget. Not because it might help someone remember, but because somebody needs to. I didn't open the show that night with music. No soothing jazz or old vinyl warmth to ease people in. I just spoke, right into the mic, like I was talking to someone sitting across from me. I said, "Tonight, I want you to do something with me. I want you to record your voice. Doesn't matter what you say. Just make it something you'd want someone to hear if they ever forgot what you meant to them." I paused, listening to the quiet hum of the station's equipment in the background. Then I said, "And I'll go first." I turned down the lights in the booth and pulled out my phone. I sat on the desk and pressed record. Not for the show, not to air later, just for her. "Hey, Sarah," I said, voice steady but softer than usual. "I know you haven't left. You're still here, and so am I. But I can feel something slipping, and I'm scared that one morning you're going to look at me and not see anything worth holding on to." I kept talking. I didn't script it. I didn't plan it. I just let the words come. "I know you still do the little things. The coffee in the morning, the folded laundry, the way you still hum when you're distracted, even if you don't notice it anymore. But I haven't felt you look at me in weeks, and I miss that more than I know how to say." I stopped the recording there. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't poetic. It just was honest. I turned the mic back on and told my listeners, that's it. That's all it takes. A voice, a truth, something you'd want to leave behind if your love vanished. And all you had left was static. Then the call started. Not just confessions or fears this time, but people asking, "Can I leave a message too?" So I opened the airwaves. I turned the studio into a time capsule. A woman named Kay read a short message for her brother, who had stopped speaking to her after their parents passed. "You used to call me your best friend. I don't know when that stopped, but if you ever remember what it felt like, I'll still be here." A man named Elliot recorded a message for his husband. He choked up twice but got through it. "You taught me how to love when I didn't think I was capable. I hope somewhere in you, that lesson's still alive, even if you've forgotten who gave it to you." A teenager called in, quiet voice. Said her mom doesn't say, "I love you" anymore. Just drive safe and eat something. So she left her a message. "If you forget I'm your daughter, please don't forget I loved you more than I knew how to say." Some of them asked for songs after their messages. Some didn't. Some just sat in silence, letting the line stay open like they didn't want to hang up first. And I realized something powerful. People weren't just leaving messages for others. They were leaving them for themselves. Because love, even when it goes unanswered, still deserves to be said out loud. I told the audience, if you think this thing is going to erase who you are to someone, don't wait for them to ask. Tell them now. Record it. Write it. Whisper it. Even if they don't respond, you'll know it existed. That's the only defense we have left. I queued up an old voicemail from a listener who couldn't go on air live. It was a man in his 70s. He simply said, "I don't know if my wife still loves me, but I want her to know that I loved her every day, even the ones when I forgot how to show it." That was the last thing I aired before the hour ended. No song, no ad, no bumper, just a line of quiet stretching into the static. Because some things don't need music. They just need a voice. It was about halfway through my shift when I got the call from someone who didn't want to share their name. He said he was calling from a research facility on the East Coast. Didn't say which one. His voice was controlled, not robotic, but deliberate, like every word was weighed twice before he let it out. He told me he wasn't officially authorized to talk to media, but he'd been listening to the show. Said the station had become something of a phenomenon in certain circles. Doctors, neurologists, psychologists. People like him, trying to understand whatever this is. "We call it ADS," he said. "Affective dissociation syndrome. But I know you already know that. What we haven't told the public, what we've barely told each other, is that it's not progressing like any known cognitive disease. It's not a virus, not chemical, not trauma-based." I asked him, "Then what is it?" He hesitated for a long time before answering. "We think it's ideological," he said. "A thought form, a mimetic cascade." I didn't say anything. I let the silence push him. It's spreading like an idea, he explained. The way laughter spreads in a crowd. Or panic. Or faith. Except this isn't a feeling we're catching. It's the absence of one. I asked him what triggered it. Was it media? Was it technology? Was it emotional burnout on a global scale? He said, that's the hard part. We don't know. But it looks like once someone begins to doubt the emotional reality of their love, once they start asking, was it real? Or was it just routine? The detachment sets in almost immediately. So doubt is the doorway. He called it the collapse of the emotional narrative. Once the story no longer feels true, the feeling behind it decays. Like Love is a song you stop humming once the lyrics no longer make sense. I asked him if there were any exceptions. Anyone who hadn't shown symptoms. Anyone who seemed resistant. He paused again, then said something I've carried with me ever since. There's a small group of people who don't seem to be affected. Not yet. Not even when their partners forget them. They keep feeling, keep reaching. We think the key might be in how they relate to love. Not as a reaction, but as a decision. A commitment. Not a feeling that rises and fades, but a practice. I asked him, so you're saying love that's chosen is more resilient than love that's felt? He answered, maybe not stronger, but stickier, harder to shake, like a scar instead of a bruise. Then he said something else that chilled me. We're seeing cases where people are using stories, old letters, photos, songs, even rituals to trigger emotional recall. Sometimes it works, briefly. Sometimes they cry. Sometimes they look confused, like they're feeling something they forgot how to name. And sometimes they just walk away. Before hanging up, he asked me to keep doing what I was doing. You're one of the only people left creating anchors, he said. Keep giving people something to hold on to, even if it's just static with meaning. I ended the call and sat in the booth for a while, not speaking, just thinking about what he said. A disease of disbelief, an emotional erosion, something that spreads not through blood or breath, but through doubt. And I started to wonder, how many times in our lives have we backed away from love because we thought maybe it was just a feeling, temporary, chemical, a phase? And what if that belief is what opens the door? So I spoke into the mic directly this time, not to the crowd, not to the network, but to the people who are still clinging to someone who's starting to forget. I said, if they've gone quiet, be louder. If they've turned cold, stay warm. Not because it will fix them, but because it reminds you what it means to love, even when it isn't returned. Because maybe that's what resistance looks like now. Not in a lab, but in the simple, stubborn act of remembering someone who has already begun to forget you.